Okay, so this video has been on the back burner for a little while. There's been so many other things to cover that I just had to sit it aside for a short while. So this is part 2 of my breakdown of the interview that was done with Stearns' Disney girlfriend. At the time of making this video, we are 1 month out from Stearns' first trial, supposedly, unless of course there's delays. So if you're not aware, I've been going back through some of the key interviews that were done straight after or around the time that all this happened. And I think this particular interview is particularly important and may give us an idea of what questions are going to be asked of this individual at trial, because we know that she has been called as a witness. Now, as many of you are aware, I've been having major issues with regards to my Madeline Soto content, so you can help me out by hitting the like button, and also, if you are new here, please subscribe to my channel. Now, I probably should mention, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this on previous videos, the trial has been pushed back 1 day. I'm not sure the reasoning for that, but it now begins on the 15th of July. Unless, of course, there are further delays. Now, I'm contemplating that this may be the final, or this particular interview may be the final interview that I review. As much as I can see the need to do this, at the same time, if I'm not getting views on these videos and they're being demonetized, as much as I hate to say it, these are extremely time-consuming videos to make, and it's possibly just not going to be viable for me to continue to do these analyses of these videos. If there are any that you particularly want me to cover that I haven't covered yet, let me know, but I can't give any guarantees right now. I will admit it is extremely discouraging for me, but it seems that we live in a world where bullies can get what they want. And before you ask, if you know, you know. If you don't, well, maybe go back and watch a few of my videos and you might get the gist. So on that note, let's just jump back into this interview and see if we can get it out of the way in this video.
When were you guys in a relationship?
I don't remember when it started because it transitioned from being friends at work but we were done by end of April. By May 3rd is I found, because I have to take screenshots of messages. Back then is when I
Obviously April of last year?
Yeah.
2023? Okay.
So if she's right with what she's saying there, then if, as she said, she started connecting with him in 2022, would that mean that this woman was going out with Stefan at the time that Stefan and Jen broke up? I'm trying to get my head around the timeline and I'm not quite getting it right now.
That's when I told him that he was no longer to talk to me.
Okay, and when you guys were in, whether friends or in a relationship, during the same time frame as when he's disclosing all these things?
When we were intimate, that's when he started, disclosing these things as he was venting about his situation in the house.
Sorry, when he was venting about his situation in the house? That is such a manipulative tactic, isn't it? He's basically trying to downplay what was going on with him in the house by making it sound like it was a huge imposition on him. So he was venting to her basically to manipulate. Clearly, it wasn't something that was actually concerning for him, but he knew that was the only way to get her to accept the situation. The whole, yeah, I know you probably don't like it, but you know what? I really don't like it either, but I'm just stuck.
When I was aware that that he moved out, then I was, a little more okay. He's out of that, but I don't know. Nobody knows.
So is she trying to say here that because he moved out of the townhouse like 8 months after him and her split up, that she just decided that the stuff that was going on that he was venting about didn't really matter? It was like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm not responsible for it now because he's moved out. Because that sounds like what she's inferring here. Trying to make an excuse in terms of why she never reported anything. Oh, well, he moved out anyway. Yes, but he moved out 8 months later. You should have been reporting all this stuff as soon as you found out. And I have to say, and I may sound cruel here, but I hope this woman is not planning on trying to get work as a teacher, because she should not be going into the teaching profession. I don't care if she's got her qualifications. She's not suited to becoming a teacher if she's going to take on board the sort of information that Stefan gave her and do nothing with it.
Did he ever actually disclose of... No.
The only thing is that they cuddle in bed. Because when he told me that she sleep with them in bed, my naive thinking was that it was Maddie, Mom, and him. And I did talk to him. Okay, she sleeps, and he's like, no, she needs to be right next to me because she likes my body warm. Which, I'm sorry, but to me that was disgusting,
I'm so sick of all these people who, after the fact, are turning around and saying, yeah, I saw this as a huge red flag, I didn't like it. She's talking about Stefan sleeping in the same bed with Maddie and Maddie snuggling with him, and yet she's basically stuck her head in the sand and being like, well, I didn't like it. But you didn't do anything about it either, did you?
Okay. Let me ask you this. Why did you wait to say anything?
From last year to now?
Mm-hmm.
Again, because I thought he was just being a dumb person that didn't know to distinguish, because even my dad never came out of the shower naked. But
I'm sorry, that is the most piss-weak excuse I've ever heard. I thought it was just him being a dumb person. Intelligence should not come into consideration when you are talking about someone doing the things that he was doing. She's admitting that he came out of the shower naked in front of Maddie. She's admitting that he's told her that he was sharing a bed with Maddie and snuggling with Maddie. She's admitting that he got what's a word I can use that YouTube won't ban? It was probably going to be demonetised anyway. So, an erect thing when he was in bed with Maddie. But in her mind that's okay because she thought he was dumb. I'm sorry, but being dumb doesn't stop anyone from doing inappropriate behaviours.
I just thought it was dumb. I did get grossed out by all these comments to the point that I couldn't even see him at work. I was very happy when he quit,
So, because of the number of things that she says that are just so off base, I am just going to basically pause in between statements rather than allow her to completely finish answering a question before commenting. So, for her, the things that he has told her have made her so very uncomfortable that she couldn't even look at him when she was at work. And yet the flip side of that is that she didn't really think she needed to report any of those things. I'm sorry. If someone is doing things that make you that uncomfortable that you can't even look at them, that should be enough of a cue for you to realise that you actually need to report them. That what they're doing is beyond wrong, and that you as an individual need to act, or essentially your actions are condoning his actions. By choosing not to act, you're essentially saying you're okay with this happening with a child.
Did you ever confront him about these?
I did.
Yes. What was his reaction to those?
While he was disclosing these things, I would be like, I think that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. I compare it to my dad. He would twist it into, this is like an innocent thing. I didn't mean her. Then he would change it into like, I quickly cover, and...
So again, she's contradicting herself. On one hand, she's already said in this interview that she sees him as being a manipulative individual. And then she's brushed his actions off by saying, I thought he was just dumb. And now, when she's been asked, well, did you confront him over these things? She's like, oh yeah, but he had these excuses, he was manipulative. Well, that's not someone just being dumb then, is it? I think she annoys me more than anybody else. Possibly, maybe Deb Stearns is number 2. But the fact that she was aware of all these things and she's basically brushing it off, saying, I thought he was dumb. But then when she doesn't want to look bad herself, she turns it around and says, well, he was manipulative, he gave excuses. Make up your mind, pick a lane. At the end of the day, you screwed up, you let a little girl down, and you know what? Had you spoken, maybe you could have made a difference in her life.
That's when I was like, okay, I just don't want to be involved with somebody so dumb. Like I feel bad because I couldn't say something, but sometimes I just thought if I say something and nothing is happening, plus I don't know their address, like I'm going to look like I'm just looking for trouble.
And now she's coming out with every excuse under the sun. If I say something and nothing is happening, well then, what have you lost? If you say something to protective services and nothing is happening, well, at least then you know that you've made an effort. You know that you have actually spoken out and done the right thing, regardless of whether or not something is happening. This is half the problem, when people are too afraid of upsetting other people. Well, because you were too afraid of upsetting other people, and because several other people were just too afraid of upsetting other people, Maddie's no longer around. And what a pathetic excuse. I didn't know their address. Well, I'm pretty certain that if you are able to give details to protective services of the individuals that you are discussing, presumably you knew Stefan's last name, and while you tried to say that you didn't know her, you did in fact admit at one point that you knew Jen. So you have enough information that you could have contacted Protective Services and said, I'm dating this guy Stephen Stearns. He's living with this woman called Jennifer Soto. He's a Disney employee. You can probably contact my boss to get more details. And this is what's going on. Like, hello, not everybody is going to be able to give Protective Services an address when they're reporting something like this. That's not an excuse to turn around and go, well, I couldn't report it because I didn't know what his address was.
You know, and today, looking back, today I got to work and I just couldn't work. So, you know, I feel awful because if I had said something, she would have been fine now, maybe.
Okay, so while she can't wear it on her own, she is along the right lines there. Because her and because so many other people didn't speak up for Maddie, that's why this happened. And I said this in the previous video. Sure, maybe if one person reports it, nothing much is going to happen. But once those reports start building up, once a file starts getting quite large, then Protective Services are obliged to act. And there's such a history of cases that have gone pear-shaped because of inaction from Protective Services that just maybe the right staff would have been put onto this case, and maybe they would have been efficient enough to make a difference. We'll never know, because this woman, like so many others, kept her mouth shut to look after her own interests first. And, you know, it may sound that I'm being a bit harsh on her, but I can pretty much guarantee that when this goes to court, the prosecution is going to come at her way, way harder than what I am. And not only that, the media are going to go at her.
But my reasoning was like, why is mom allowing, you know, this to happen? Because I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I would never allow anything like this to happen, you know.
So is she saying her reasoning for not reporting it sooner is because Jen should have been around and Jen should have been there to stop it from happening? Because it sounds like what she's saying here. Her reasoning is that the mum should have been around. So, because she's presuming that Jen should have been around, she didn't report it because... What? It's not even a logical argument.
You had mentioned that he was possibly like a roommate. So did they start off? How much do you know of their relationship, Jennifer and?
So when he started working at Disney, he would tell everybody that he had this girlfriend. They lived together. She had a kid. It was like his kid.
It makes me so angry anytime I hear reference to Stefan essentially giving people the idea that he was like Maddie's father. You know, he was the stepfather. She was like his kid. That's not how a parent treats their daughter. She was an object for him. That's all it was.
He did tell me a few times that he was very frustrated because when Maddie would do something wrong, he would try to like scold her about it, and the mom would be like snapping at him, "You're not her dad, do not talk to her like that."
I'd like to know why we are getting different versions of this. We're getting some people saying Stefan wasn't allowed to discipline Maddie, other people saying that he was, and that he was like her dad, and part of that was that he was allowed to discipline her. So which is it? Because, I mean, okay, this woman, I can't see her being dishonest about this. However, this is hearsay that she is sharing. She's basically saying what Stefan has told her. So, if Stefan had a motivation for telling her that Jen wouldn't allow him to discipline Maddie, then we don't know that motivation. We don't know the reasoning or, the conversations around this whole story in the first place. So it makes it really hard to know whether to take this as truth or not truth. I suspect it was more of his manipulation, possibly something in relating to his interactions with Maddie, and she's questioned him over it, and he's turned around and said, well, I don't have any control over it. Jen doesn't let me. Maybe it's to do with the whole sleeping arrangements, and he's saying, well, I have no control over that. That's purely Jen's control, because she goes off at me if I try and discipline Maddie in any way.
At some point, they break up, and he's living there because he couldn't afford to move out.
Okay.
But at the same time, because I did talk to him in the house. Apparently, the house is owned by Jen's dad, and then there was a bedroom that they were looking for somebody to rent. So I told him, why don't you rent that bedroom, and then live there for now because it's going to be cheaper. And he said that Jen's bed is comfortable, and he wouldn't sleep anywhere. I even told him, like, when Maddie moves to her bed, then why don't you get up and move to Maddie's bed, since she's there, then you don't have to be involved in. Because I told him, like, you never know if she gets mad at you. In my naive thinking that he's a good guy, I don't know because we don't know, but in my naive thinking, if Jen gets mad at you for not wanting to be with her, she can go to the cops and say that you're doing things to her daughter. Like, that's what I told him, and he goes, well, she's not going to do that. And then I said, why don't you just move to Maddie's bed? Sleep in her bedroom and have them both sleep in the other bed. That way you are separated from all that. And he goes, no, Maddie's bed is very uncomfortable.
So, of course, as you're aware with the timeline, he didn't move upstairs to room 4 until after him and this woman had split up. So she's actually broached the possibility of, why don't you sleep upstairs in the empty room? And his excuse was, it's not comfortable, Jen's bed is comfortable, so he wants to stay in Jen's bed. Well, dude, that case, you should have been moving out and moving back home at that very point in time. Because selfish, I can't say the word, not your bed, not your house. You shouldn't have been in that bed ever. Or at least not when Maddie was there. And then turning around and saying, oh, he couldn't possibly sleep in Maddie's bed because it was so uncomfortable. So he's got all these excuses. He can't, wait until Maddie falls asleep and then leave the bed. Which, is something that a lot of parents will do if their child needs some sort of comforting and wants them in their bed. It's not uncommon for a parent to wait for the child to fall asleep and then make their exit. But he was never a parent for Maddie in the first place. He should never have been sharing a bed with her, with or without Jen. And it sounds like this woman has just accepted his excuses. She's like, these are the things you could do, and he's given her excuses, and she's just been like, okay, whatever. Go ahead, just go and sleep with that 12-year-old girl then. Because I can see that, who'd want to impose on you on the hardship of sleeping in an uncomfortable bed? Goldilocks Stearns. Like, how ridiculous. And if Maddie's bed really was that uncomfortable, why wasn't Jen doing something to make sure that Maddie had a bed that she might actually enjoy sleeping in? And perhaps a bed in a location where she'd be happy to sleep in it, not in the middle of the living room. But have you noticed that she takes on board Stefan's excuses and uses them as her own excuses for inaction? So, I spoke to him about it, but he said the beds were uncomfortable. So I didn't do anything more about it. Like, hello? You could have done heaps more. You could have reported it, for starters.
I'm like, okay, you have a kid sleeping in an uncomfortable bed. That's all my reasoning was. I just wanted to get away from this guy at that point, and I was thinking that Jen would have Maddie's best interest in not letting anything happen to this kid.
So she's already admitted that she doesn't really know Jen. And yet, now she's saying that she thought Jen would have had Maddie's best interests at heart. Essentially, that's the other reason why she didn't do anything. And of course, because she just wanted to get away from him. So, first of all, putting her own selfish needs first, she just didn't want to have any part in it because she didn't like Stefan, so she didn't want any involvement. Didn't matter to her that a child could have been potentially being harmed. Wonder if it matters to her now. She said it's been worrying her or whatever she said about it. I hope it still is something that bothers her. Because at the end of the day, she is one of the people that could have made a difference. But this ridiculous claim of, oh, well, I know nothing at all about the mother. Wouldn't know anything about her personality. Wouldn't know if she really would give a rat's ass. But I'm going to just presume that, well, the mother would do something about it, so I don't need to. And of course, the thing that makes that even more absurd is the fact that she already knows that Jen just allows it to happen, or allowed it to happen and did nothing about it. She knows that Jen sat back and watched all these things happen. She knows that Jen was present when these things were happening. And yet now she's applying some kind of motherly responsibility to Jen that clearly she never had.
I'm sorry, I just don't know what else to tell you.
Translation being, I'm sorry, I know my excuses are pretty piss poor, but I've run out of excuses and I can't come up with any more.
Okay. Does he still work at Disney?
No, he quit.
No?
I don't know exactly when, because I didn't want to be involved. So, but he did quit. He did tell some people that, and this is as it was happening, that he had a job lined up in another state, but then about not even before Maddie disappeared, somebody, because people at Disney gossip, somebody was saying, oh no, he's living in South Florida with his mom. And then that's when I was like, oh, okay, so I hope he knows that, he can come up here and help look for Maddie. This morning is when I was aware that he was the boyfriend. I just thought Jen had another boyfriend.
Stefan and his ridiculous lies. Oh, he's got another job interstate. Yeah, right. As if he would move interstate and be away from his parents, because even before he was in jail, they were throwing all their money at him. I mean, his mobile phone that was registered in Chris's name. well, his Honda was apparently registered in his name, but it sounds like it was a complete utter clunker. And when he ran that into the ground, what did they do? Here you go, you can drive our car. He had credit cards that were supplied by Chris. Chris paid his rent in Jen's apartment as if he would have ever moved interstate away from his parents. But, he was too arrogant to tell people that he was moving back in with his parents. Because, at 37 does make you sound like a bit of a loser. And that's not to say, if someone has major life upheavals, if you've just gone through a divorce and you need somewhere to stay while you get yourself back together again, that's different. But to move back in with your parents because your father is sick of paying your rent, that's pretty pathetic. No wonder he didn't want anyone at Disney to know.
What did he do at Disney?
He worked attractions. He was an attraction operator.
Do you know if he was in relationships with anybody else from Disney?
There were rumors. Now everybody knows that I was involved with him, which nobody knew until. But there were rumors that so he was working with us in Figment, which is like the dinosaur, like the dragon ride. But then he moved to Soaring, and there were rumors that he had sex with somebody from Soaring. That's about it.
I was trying really hard to pick up what section she said that he moved to, but I couldn't pick it up. Maybe that I'm just not familiar with the different areas of Disney, who knows. But, it wouldn't surprise me if he did have a relationship with someone from that section. Sounds like he really had no respect for women. And I shouldn't say having a relationship because that's not what she was referring to. Relations, we'll say. But honestly, this guy just no respect for women whatsoever, in my opinion. I wonder if that woman ever came forward, whoever she was, and spoke to detectives or to prosecutors. Maybe she had no information or thought she had no information and wanted to protect her privacy. Who knows? Of course, that could have been cleared up had the detective asked for a name. Because clearly, this woman probably knew the name of this person that she's referring to.
There was this one cast member that was very good friends with him for a while. So I don't know if you guys want to, maybe he said some other things to her.
Okay.
So based on the amount of information she's just given, she basically says that there is another potential witness here. And his reaction is, okay. Not, well, I think, yeah, we might get the details for that person off you so that we can make contact with them and question them just in case they do have any additional information to give that might help the investigation. No. His response is, okay. So I hope that when the prosecution deposed this Disney woman, that they actually asked her these details and maybe got the details of whoever this other woman was so they could make contact with her and speak to her.
Tell me a little bit about how your relationship was with him when you guys were officially dating. Was there anything that stood out?
Intimate because we were never boyfriend girlfriend, but when we were intimate.
When you say intimate, are you guys? We're all adults here.
We hung out.
You having sex or?
We did have sex
Okay.
a few times. This is odd. Okay. You're two guys here. Okay. So he was not all there. Like,
What do you mean by that?
he wouldn't get an erection.
Okay.
Like, it would be more like a soft erection.
Okay.
And so it was not like, we were like bunnies, but it was more like we hung out a lot, we talked a lot. It was more like giving each other company. That's about it.
Now, I suspect she's underplaying it a little bit, and that they probably had relations more than a few times. But how sickening is it? She's basically saying that, he couldn't get it up with her. And yet we know from Jen that he had Viagra or whatever the other stuff was. Meaning that he must have been saving that for special occasions. I don't know how else to put it. Even that to me is irksome, but basically it sounds like he wasn't overly interested in this woman. Perhaps she was a little bit too old for him.
Play board games. So he'll come often and we'll just play a board game. We will drink, have a few shots of moonshine.
Did in any of these, whether he's drinking or normal, did any of his behaviors change? Did he ever become different, violent, depressed,
violent.
or anything that stood out?
He was never violent. He was a very depressed person. All the time he was depressed. There was always something troubling him. Like at work, he wanted to be a trainer.
So essentially he's a whiny git. Doesn't surprise me in the least that he thought he should be a trainer at work, because it seems like Stefan thinks he is better than everybody. So if there was anyone above him in his position at work, he probably felt that he was already better than that person and therefore deserved their position. And you know what's frightening about that is, I don't know what Disney's hiring age is, but I shudder to think of him as a trainer having direct access to younger females as their supervisor, essentially.
Like if people didn't get along with him, it was like frustrating. Like he was always frustrated. You will, hey, how's your day going? Oh, I'm just frustrated, And when we had an argument, he didn't become violent. Like it's because of I don't know my way to be. I tend to intimidate people, even though I'm like the sweetest person. But like I give this demeanor that don't mess with me, and maybe that was it. But like
You said he was never violent,
not
right?
with me.
Okay.
But he would argue and like it was like his way or no way. Like
Okay, she sort of contradicts herself there. She's saying he was never violent with her. But she also said that when they got in an argument, he'd then become violent. I think what she's trying to refer to is the way he spoke, perhaps loud and aggressive. Or is this a slip that she's just backtracked on as soon as the detective has asked her, you said he didn't become violent? He's picked up on it. He's asked for clarification. And she's turned around and said, no, it's just the way he argues. But what we're hearing here is a combination of things that could equate to someone losing their temper easily. He's frustrated easily. He's violent, apparently, in the way he argues, I'm guessing. Or he's violent and she's just not trying to avoid it. But also, it's his way or no way. Sounds to me like this is a guy who would not cope well with someone standing up to him and someone saying, this stops now, this ends. Because that's been part of my speculation throughout this, that Maddie's been coached by her counsellor at school to speak up for herself. Not only that, they were doing sex ed in science, which means that they would have been talking about consensual relationships and all that sort of stuff. So it does seem quite possible that Maddie could have spoken up and said, this ends now, I've had enough. You know, I know this from school and you can't do this, you know, anything like that. I can imagine that the my way or no way from someone who can become quite verbally aggressive, someone who can become quite frustrated. I can imagine that escalating to someone snapping and losing their temper. And, you know, we did have from Jen that basically Deb and Chris had to tiptoe around in their own house because they were afraid of him losing his temper.
He would never win an argument. He was the know-it-all. I know it all, and you know, and he was always right. So more like, okay, you're right. Okay, goodbye. You know, so he would just twist things. You know, when there was like I don't agree with you, he would just keep twisting it until he was right.
I mean, we've seen him in action. He is a classic narcissist who knows how to manipulate people extremely well. He knows how to gaslight, and he knows how to come out on top in terms of, you know, he'd be the sort of person to be like, no, I never said that. How dare you accuse me of saying that? Even if you've got it on record, you know, even if you've got a text message that says this is, you know, you said this, he would still be like, I never said that. And people like that can become particularly dangerous if someone won't accept their reality and argues back when they are basically trying to assert themselves and have whoever they're arguing with acknowledge that they're right. And it gives you some glimpse into how he probably continued to control Maddie while she was little. Because if she were to question anything, he would have manipulated her. He would have made her feel guilty for questioning it. He would have made her feel like she was the bad person for questioning him in the first place. He would have gaslit her to the point where she believed she was in the wrong. And of course, in between all that, there would have been the love bombing. So she wouldn't have wanted to upset him because she would have been afraid of losing his love.
You know, that's about it. But depression, yeah, he told me he was like he takes Adderall, that medication. So he said that if he didn't take Adderall, he wouldn't function. I was trying, in the time that we talked, I was trying for him to get off the Adderall, but he wouldn't.
Now, this is a bit of an aside. This doesn't necessarily connect with Maddie, and I am by no means standing up for Stearns here at all. But this is something that really ticks me off. And that is people who are neurotypical, meaning that they don't have ADHD, they don't have autism, they don't have bipolar, any of these things that affect the brain. And there is this notion that they can tell someone who is neurodivergent, like someone with ADHD, for example, how they should be medicated. There's this notion that it's okay to say to someone, oh, you should go off those medications. I don't understand how people think it's okay to tell someone what medications they should or shouldn't be on. Like I said, I'm not standing up for Stearns here, not in the least. But this is one thing that really, really ticks me off. Because these are people who don't actually have any understanding whatsoever of the journey that people with neurodiversity have to go through, of the daily struggle that they go through so often. And there is this assumption from people who don't really understand that, well, if you've got ADHD and you understand that you've got ADHD, then you can learn ways to manage it. You can manage it without your medication. Well, unless you've walked a mile in their shoes, then you don't know the difference that medication can make for someone with ADHD. It is something that should be a personal choice. Some people prefer not to have medications for their ADHD, their autism, their bipolar. Some people rely heavily on it, and it allows them to get through the day almost as seamlessly as someone who does not struggle with ADHD. So that's just my little rant. I felt a little bit triggered hearing her talking about telling him that he didn't need to be on Adderall. Personally, I'm not even sure that he did have ADHD. He doesn't strike me as having ADHD. I think he's just a narcissist that's been overindulged. And honestly, the rest of it, not so much. There could be an element of autism there, but honestly, I don't think we need to care about him in terms of that, because that's got nothing to do with what he did.
When you guys were intimate, did he do anything specific? Did he video?
No,
Was
I don't
he?
know that to happen, but one time, he had me lay, this is very weird, I'm sorry, but he had me lay face down,
Okay.
like dead. Like it was like face down completely, and he,
Like completely flat?
yeah.
Okay.
And then he went, and that's the only one time that he was really erect, if I'm telling you. That was it, and it was very weird to me. Like, just, at some point I was just so grossed out that I'm open to try things, but there are things that you're like, okay, are you trying to have sex with a corpse here? Or, that was my...
Honestly, the guy truly is the biggest piece of crap on the entire planet. That is all about a power thing for him. Not to mention the other side of it. And the fact that is the one time when, well, I don't even like talking about it. Just when I think of it in relation to Maddie, it's sickening. And I'm really glad that when he tries to go out for exercise, that the other inmates remind him that they're there.
And I think that was the last time that we were, because it was too much for me to, it was really hard to see that person at work all the time.
You know what does make that kind of sucky? The fact that for her, part of the reasoning for her finding it hard to actually see him at work she's expressed that what he was doing was something that she was not comfortable with, something that she didn't approve of. So for her, there would have been that element of shame as well. And every time she saw him, she would have been reminded of that. And the thing is, in situations like this, these women lose sight of the fact that actually they've been victimised here. They've been asked to do something that they're not uncomfortable with. And yet they're the ones feeling the guilt over it. And I think that's something that needs to change. And I think needs to start with people like this woman understanding that if someone crosses a line with you, it's not your fault and there's no shame in it. I guess there's some shame in it if you continue to cross that line even though it doesn't feel right for you. If you have done so willingly, and if it's not something that you have been manipulated into doing. Again, not a conversation I'm hugely comfortable with, so I will move on from that.
Yeah, and when I spoke with the coordinators, which is like an assistant manager, the few times that he would stare at me from afar and just stare, you know, and his goal was to make me uncomfortable. I would call coordinator and I'll be like, hey, get me out of here, please, and they'll quickly get me out. So the amount of times that happened, it was maybe like 3 times, and luckily, you know, when he decided, there was one time that once I found out he was going to work in my attraction, I just called out. You know, that was the point where he made me uncomfortable. But violent, he was not violent.
And another situation where action should have been taken. He should have been hauled in for workplace harassment. Nobody should have to work under those conditions. And it's all very well to be like, you know, get me out of here. But you know what that does long term? Because more often than not, you're looking at a management structure that is quite often male dominated. They would have eventually started looking at her as being problematic because she wasn't making a complaint. It would have come back on her. It's lucky for her that Stearns quit his Disney job. Because if she wasn't going to report it, it was going to reach a point where it was going to impact on the way her superiors saw her and could have impacted on her future employment. And I get it. Going to a superior and saying, I don't like the way he's looking at me, doesn't really sound like much at all. And the superior might just go, well, you know, you have to learn to work together. Because there isn't enough understanding of these things, I think, in the workplace. But my advice to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation is make sure that you do mention it to a supervisor each time. Or at the very least, make sure you start documenting it. Have a little notebook and in it you write the date, the time, and what it was that occurred and how it made you feel. But these things certainly are better off dealt with if you speak to a supervisor. the other thing I would strongly suggest for anyone ever finding themselves in this kind of situation is that in terms of approaching a supervisor, one-on-one conversations are fine. However, you need to always follow up with an email so that you have documentation. So even if it's just a case of further to our discussion earlier today with regards to this thing, can I just clarify that this is the advice you have given? You know, something brief, something simple, documenting it. Because jerks like Stefan, they will escalate or they will continue regardless. And I feel sad for this woman that she was made to feel uncomfortable in her workplace. So I will admit it was slightly off topic, but also it gives us a really good understanding of just how manipulative Stefan is and the possibilities of things that he is capable of if he doesn't get his own way.
Okay.
Do you know his first and last name?
His name is Stefan Stearns.
Okay. You know his birthday?
I'm really bad with numbers.
That's okay.
No, but I know he's 2 years younger than me.
But you know his first and last name?
Yeah.
And it's a gentleman that was arrested?
Yeah. Okay. And I know that his parents live either Sarasota or south of Sarasota.
Did you meet him at Disney, or did you meet him prior to?
No, at Disney.
Okay.
Yeah, he was training when I was already working in attraction.
And how long after you met him did you guys start this?
That's the thing, like, so I was thinking about it today. I started working that attraction I trained in August, then I started working in October because I went on a month-long vacation. So that's when he was training. There was a lot of new people then, so we all kind of clicked together. And then that's, I would say, by Christmas, we exchanged gifts, he and I.
Okay. So by Christmas and then by April it's done?
By end of May. End of April.
So it was like quick, maybe 4 months then?
Yeah, because we didn't go intimate quickly.
Okay.
No, it was
So, if she's talking about the December, and they were only together for 4 months, then it seems to possibly fit with around the time that him and Jen broke up. Now, we know that him and Jen weren't having relations at that point in time because of Jen's medications. And dare I say it, it sounds like perhaps he didn't really seek her out for relations, but rather because maybe that whole emotional connection between him and Jen had fallen apart, and perhaps he was just after someone for the emotional connection side of it, not the physical side of it. Because sadly it seems like he had the physical side of it already sorted out, and I hate saying that, but you know where I'm coming from with that. And her commenting on him not being able to perform very well, all of that seems to point to the one thing.
When you guys were at Disney, did he ever drive around like in the woods or anything like that? Was he an outdoors guy?
He is an outdoors guy.
Yes.
I am an outdoors person. I go hiking a lot. That's the reason why we started chit-chatting and hanging out more. We went hiking once to Moss Park. But I brought him. I was the one that brought him there.
Did he ever bring you to any places?
No, that's the only one time we went hiking. Because again, the relationship wasn't long.
Yeah.
So I took him to Moss Park.
When was that? When did you take him to Moss Park?
It was, I think it was before December 2022 because it wasn't cold yet, and I remember that I had invited him hiking as a friend, like we were just co-workers, and he couldn't go. But we did hike the Splito Trail. It's right next to Moss Park.
Okay.
So we went into Moss Park, but we hiked the trail next to it.
Oh, okay.
So I just did try to look for Moss Park in the Florida area. It appears possibly it's in Orlando. Nowhere near the location where Stefan took Maddie, basically. I know there's some of you who know the area quite well who can probably help me out here, correct me if I'm wrong, tell me what the actual name of the place is that would actually come up on the map, but it certainly doesn't sound like it was anywhere near St. Cloud. But my question is this: when Jen was being asked about possible locations that Stearns could have gone to, and she was asked about, friends that he had in the area, and she's like, he didn't have any friends in the area, surely she would have known that he went hiking with this woman? Unless, I guess it was before him and her were broken up, so maybe she didn't. But she must have, she knew that he was spending time at this woman's house. But, it was something that was glossed over or not really discussed. It would be really interesting to know just whereabouts in Orlando, Kissimmee, wherever, where this woman actually did live. And if that's the reason why Jen was avoiding saying much about her. Or maybe just Jen didn't know enough about her to say where she lived or to say anything to detectives.
Do you know, other than his family down south, does he have any close friends or relatives in the Central Florida area? No?
He doesn't have close friends. The only people that he was friends with was the few cast members at Disney. The one cast member in particular that he hang out with, other than me, by himself. They hung out a few times, like went to the bars.
You know how to spell her last name?
Yeah. I got my. I think I can find her on Facebook, so I don't misspell it.
So she has to bring up this person 3 times before he finally asks her for information about this person. That's pretty slack.
What was her vibe like?
Huh?
What was her vibe like? Did you get any...
She's a very laid back girl. She has, she's special. I don't know what she has going on, but she is very she's angry all the time. She's a cast member that is angry all the time.
Now, that's a really interesting description that she's giving there. This other cast member, she first of all describes her as being special, and then says she's angry all the time. Now, my first thought when she said that was, oh, is she referring to someone who's got issues with rugs, and that maybe that's why Stefan was attracted to her, because he was getting stuff off her. But then I remembered that Disney employees have to have, can be subjected to random testing, meaning that if her issue was that, chances are she wouldn't have been still at Disney, she wouldn't have got through the training. So I took a step back and thought, well, what's the other interpretation here? Does she literally mean special as in that she is someone who has an intellectual disability? And people with intellectual disabilities can sometimes also struggle with their tempers, because it could be that that particular part of the brain is the part that's affected, and so they do struggle to regulate their emotions. And when you think about it, it makes sense that Stefan would target someone like that. She would have been easy prey for him. Someone that he could basically manipulate, and he could have the control in the situation. Which is interesting, because while I 100% believe that Jen is more manipulative than Stefan, I can't help thinking that possibly the original attraction for him was her mental disabilities, and that he probably saw her as someone that he could manipulate. I'd be very curious to know if this other cast member has any children. Although I suspect that's probably not the issue here, but that it's more about him having chosen someone who, to him, appeared vulnerable, someone who he could easily manipulate.
She's the only one cast member that I know he hung out with a lot.
Is this the one that he was rumored to have?
No. Not that I know of, because I never asked for who he was. I don't care, you know. But if he talked to someone a lot, that would be...
Probably her.
Yeah.
So she's actually saying here that she doesn't know if this woman that Stefan was hanging out with is the same people that people were sharing rumours about, saying that she had slept with Stefan. She's not saying that she isn't the person, she's just saying that she didn't know, because she essentially didn't ask when the rumours were going around. And I can't blame her. I mean, with Stefan, it'd be like, yeah, I just don't want to even talk about this guy because he's just such a lowlife. You know, if you'd have made the mistake of going out with him, the last thing you would want to think about would be him having a relationship with anyone else, because it would just be almost re-traumatising to think about it.
When we were friends, he was open. He didn't have friends. He was always he told me that he was very frustrated because when he was younger, he could have any sex with anybody he wanted, and then since he got older, it was harder for him, you know, like he felt like he was ugly. That's about it.
Oh, come on, seriously, you didn't buy that crap, did you? That is classic manipulation. He obviously, the day that he was saying that to her, he wanted some. So how does he manipulate her? He tries to manipulate her by making her feel sorry for him. Because, obviously, he expected that by saying to her that, you know, he wasn't attractive anymore, that she would prove it to him that he was. And then he would get exactly what he wanted. I mean, seriously, the guy's got tickets on himself. So I can't believe that he would actually say something like that to a woman, believing it. The only reason he would say something like that would be because he was trying to manipulate her. It was a calculated move, and I'd like to know if it paid off for him. And I mean, really, it shows you that he's got tickets on himself anyway by saying that he could have any girl he wanted when he was younger. Someone like that doesn't change and suddenly think, I'm not really a stud anymore. He would consider himself to still be a stud. So exactly what he was saying to her was nothing more than manipulation. He did not believe it at all.
Did he ever tell you about what he's attracted to? No? Okay.
Well, Hispanic women, that's what he
Okay.
said.
Okay.
Okay, I think I heard her say that he likes Hispanic women. Am I correct? Which actually is ironic, but also makes a lot of sense. Ironic because we know that his mother is a shocking racist and that she would have expected him to have a white girlfriend. But at the same time, it's not the least bit surprising because it sounds like when we look at the information we have from various sources, it sounds like Deb Stearns was both emotionally abusive and perhaps to some extent physically abusive when Stefan was growing up. So, in one way, him having these girlfriends that his mother wouldn't have approved of would have been a subtle up yours to her from him, but also it would have been a reaction. He would have preferred these women because they were far removed from his own mother. He wanted women who did not remind him of his mother. And of course, it would have been one of the few things that he could control in terms of his relationship with his mother. By having these girlfriends that weren't your typical white girl, he knew that he was basically the one in control there. He knew that he was able to defy his mother, and there wasn't a lot that she could do about it.
No, I didn't know if he had said like older, younger, whatever. Okay. Do you think he's capable of doing anything?
I don't know him a lot. Anybody is capable of doing
Correct.
anything, but did I ever felt threatened by him? No, I did not. Does he play with words and like yeah, I once I figured that he was like a very I don't know. It's not a dominant. It's like a manipulative person. Yeah, he is. That's about it.
So we have another person here who actually doesn't outright say, no, he couldn't possibly have done it. No, he's a lovely person, he's a kind person. She points out that he's manipulative, and while he wasn't violent with her, it sounds like she certainly has reservations in terms of the possibility of him being capable of doing such things. She really wasn't trying to come out in his defence, that's for sure.
Well, we appreciate you talking to us
Yeah.
and calling the sheriff's office.
I'll leave the card if you can think of anything else or something. Just give us a call back, okay? Thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
So that brings us to the end of her interview. Now, I know there are a few things in this interview that I steered away from discussing. They're just things that I don't like discussing, things that I find triggering, so things that, even if it is for the sake of Maddie, I'm just not going to go there. I'm sure there's plenty of other people who discuss those things on their channels. It's not my thing. So, what's my take on this girlfriend? First of all, it bugs me that she's trying to say, that they weren't in a relationship. They weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. Although she directly contradicts herself and says this is the first time that she's actually been in a relationship with someone from her work. So she actually did see it in her mind as being a relationship, She's backed off, I think, because of what happened. And she wants to separate herself as much as possible from what happened to Maddie. And part of that means saying that it was nothing more than a friendship. Friends with benefits, perhaps, but not a relationship. Even though it's the first relationship she's had with someone from her work. I think she has worked really hard throughout this interview to find so many excuses for turning a blind eye. And that is the biggest thing with me that stands out in this interview. There were things that she knew that she should have followed up on. But she chose not to. She didn't want to be involved. She had no concern for the welfare of this young child. Her only concern was for herself and to make sure that she didn't get caught up in anything, and perhaps to avoid the embarrassment of upsetting someone who she hasn't even met, apparently, although she contradicts herself there too. So I think, the big takeaway for me is that this woman is full of excuses, and she's now saying she has regrets in this interview, but, regrets don't bring Maddie back. And it frustrates me that she is yet another person who saw things that were wrong and chose to do nothing. And to actually turn around and say that she thought Jen would deal with it because, Jen was aware of it. Even though at the same time, she's pointing out all these things that were going on right under Jen's nose that Jen was not reacting to. So none of her excuses hold up, in my opinion. They are just that. This is someone who basically, like so many others, just wants to get on with their life and not worry about other people. Not worry about the children in their community. Which is why I've said, I hope she never, ever decides to become a teacher, even though she's qualified, because she's not suited to be a teacher. If she's someone who puts herself first and chooses to look the other way, then she really does not deserve, well, not deserve, but she really shouldn't be a teacher. I know so many teachers who would risk throwing their career away if it meant standing up for a child, if it meant being the only person to stick their neck out for a child that needed someone to stick their neck out for them. This woman would not fall into that category at all. So, no, I'm definitely not a fan, and I also offer no apologies for my assessment of this woman. I think I've explained myself well enough to say, for people to understand why I don't believe that I should be offering apologies for my assessment of this woman. She might not have met Maddie, but she still let her down. So, on that note, that brings us to the end. Thank you for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, of course, please hit that like button. That helps me get this out into the algorithm. And please leave a comment down below. Thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.
Into